Okay, we are on lesson 7, where we're going to start talking about some input and sensors. And it starts with puzzle number 1. Just want you to take a look at your some text here and your Adafruit. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And you can notice nothing's happening with my Adafruit, but I just want you to take a look at these sensors and kind of mess with your Adafruit and see what you can think, or what you think these different numbers are representing. It can represent light, it can represent temperatures, it can represent sound, it can represent accelerometers or position. So just sort of experiment with this, covering it up, giving it different light, maybe heating it up with your hand, maybe giving it some sounds, and seeing what these sensors, what you think are detecting, really. All right. Once you figure that out, go ahead and move on to your next one. I'm not going to tell you the answer. I just want you to experiment with that. But when we go on to bubble 2 here, it wants you to go ahead and update something here so that the sound sensor, right, goes in here, and it wants you to drag the sound sensor directly onto the where you would type in a value. So if you take a look at this, it wants you to get the um, get the value of the sound, right? So we're going to go in here and we're going to scroll down, and it says to do this in this app, we've already added the text label value, right? So you've used the sound sensor. We're going to go ahead and change that. So we are going to set the property of the sound value, right? That's this ID right here, this object ID. It's really telling you right here what to do. You're going to change the text of it to whatever the actual sound sensor value is. We're going to go to sound sensor. We're going to replace text with this. We're going to run it. And that's the sound right now. Now, if I was making a louder sound and I reset it, it would have a different sound on it, right? My sensor is a little bit farther from me. So it's doing it right when I click and run the program. It's instantly changing the value of the text of the sound value object to whatever the sound sensor is seeing. Now, if I move on to puzzle number 3, it wants you to make it so that when you click on this button, it's going to basically do what you just did, but rather than just running it and instantly getting the value, it's going to rely on a button here on your interface. So I'm going to go in here, and again, I'm going to say, I'm going to set the property of my light value. So this time it's doing your light value. So light value is the name of the ID for this object. I'm going to change its text to the light sensor's value, right? Throw that in here. And now if I run this, it doesn't say anything until I click update. Each time I click update, now let's cover up the light sensor. Now it's only 6 because it's in the dark underneath my hand. I'm going to update it now. It's in the sun, 208. When it does fluctuate just a little bit because these are LED light bulbs, so they're a little funky sometimes. But now that's how you're going through and you're setting up this. All right, let's move on to puzzle number 4. Okay, puzzle 4, if you read through this, it talks about a third sensor, and that is called the temperature sensor, and it has a little additional feature. If I scroll down here, instead of just saying a raw value like light sensors do or sound sensors, the temperature sensor gives you an option of Fahrenheit or Celsius. So if I scroll down here and take a look at my do this, it wants me to make a simple thermometer app that reads the values in the temperature sensor. So really, we've got 3 steps here. We're going to use design mode to create a button for updating and a label to display the temperature. All right. So just like I had back on puzzle number 3, I'm going to go into my design. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and start off with a simple button here. And I'm just going to call that update. That'll be the ID, and it'll actually also be the text. All right, well, let's go ahead and make this button a little bit bigger. There we go. And so we've got a button that we're going to be able to click on to update our temperature. And we're going to go ahead and also create a label. We're going to call this temperature. Move that, make it a little bit larger. And let's give it a different, yeah, we could leave it called temperature. And let's change the font size a little bit bigger. And that looks good. All right. And now we just need to make a container or an object for our temperature to be displayed. So let's move my Adafruit image a little bit out of the way. I want the value to go right here in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a label. And let's make that label, give it a large container here. And we're going to go in, let's make it, give it a center alignment. Let's give it a large font size. All right. And I like it to be like this. So then we're going to get rid of the text because we don't actually want it to say text. We want it to say nothing yet. And this is going to be called, let's call this temp value. All right. So now I've got my screen where I've got temperature, I've got temp value, where the temperature value is going to be showing, and then a button that's going to make that happen. Let's go ahead and go back to my code, and let's start making this happen. So now I want to add an event handler, right? That's going to respond to your update being clicked. So I've got on event. All right. And I want it to respond to this being clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and go in and say when update is clicked, what's going to happen. So I'm going to add code that will then change my temp value based off of the circuit's temp value, which I'm going to use Fahrenheit since that's what we're using here. So when I go in, I'm going to go ahead and set the property of temp value. And I'm going to set its text to, instead of the word text, I'm going to go grab from my circuit, my temp sensor Fahrenheit. So what this should do is when I click update temp, it should then go and grab the temperature sensor and put it right there. So let's run it. Let's see how it works. All right, click update temp, 78 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and cover up the temp sensor. See if we can warm it up a little bit. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds here and pause. And it's been about 30 seconds. I'm going to update the temp. Now it's 82. Now, if I take my hand off, and I'm going to pause the video here for a second, see if it will cool down, and I'll update the temp again after about 30 seconds. All right, that's about 30 seconds. Update temp. Oops, only dropped down to about 80, so it definitely drops down a little bit slower. That's a pretty simple way to use your temperature sensor within your script. And I'm going to have you go ahead and keep on moving through these. This is where I'm going to end the video at lesson 7, puzzle number 4.